If you look at the numbers, I've got the headline here, migrant crossings hit 10,000 so far this year. That's 40% up on the number who arrived by the same time last year.
Plus today.
And Keir Starmer has said repeatedly, we can do this. I've smashed terrorist gangs, I'll smash these gangs.
So smash the gangs has barely started. I mean, the key piece of legislation...
Well, no, clearly not.
30,000 later, you've been in charge for 10 months. What are you doing?
Well, it's barely started. The legislation that will introduce the counter-terrorism powers that we've been talking about has not even passed Parliament yet. We've increased enforced returns by 21% in the given period over the last year, and 24,000 have been returned. So, you know, this is slow but steady. As Kit said, nobody said this was easy.
Well, what about the dinghy rubber sniffing dogs, though, mate? Literally, Keir Starmer stood up at Interpol, at an Interpol conference, and said that he had this amazing plan, which had dogs who were trained to sniff dinghy rubber, and they were going to find the boats and stop them. I can't believe that plan's not worked yet. Such a failure.
We're not going to tolerate 50,000 people crossing the channel this year. I'm telling you,
crossings from France just by working better with France.
But the thing is, Richard, it's how you stop it. It's how you stop it. Let me just come to Ellie's point about safe routes, just to get a bit of clarity. Would you you'd expand the number of safe routes by,
Absolutely.
I don't know how many, and how many people, would you take everyone who comes from those countries once you've expanded the safe routes?
Clearly, the UK can't provide asylum to everybody who seeks it.
So where would you draw the line?
We've got to recognise that the reason that people seek asylum in the world, and there are tens of millions of people seeking asylum in the world, is because they are fleeing violence, fleeing conflict. We've shown as a country huge generosity.
Conflict in Albania.
As a country, we've shown huge generosity and shown that
we already have a returns agreement with Albania. That's not relevant. The vast majority of people who come via irregular means are Iran, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan and Sudan. Those are the main countries that we accept asylum seekers from who arrive by irregular means. All countries with reasonable justifications for fleeing, you know? Just insane to just keep talking about random countries that are not top of the pile when it comes to irregular migration, the ones who need the safe routes. By all means, have a broader discussion with the European Union about how we ensure that the burden is spread around more fairly amongst countries per capita, you know? Perfectly reasonable. Much easier if we're still in the European Union or had access to the Dublin Protocol to do that. But the idea that somehow, you know, oh, well, if we open safe routes, that means everyone has to come in. I'm like, well, that's what we have agreements with partner countries for.
we can absorb large numbers of people fleeing from Ukraine, for example. Yeah. I want to see a system that's fair, where we're not just saying that if you come from this one country, we'll support you because we're a compassionate country.
Voters might want to know how many more countries would you like to set up a safe route with?
I'd like to accept
well, let her answer that and then I'll come to you, Richard.
So on the numbers, I actually don't think you can just set a number. We've had governments for years, decades, that have set targets, 10,000, 100,000, whatever.
No, what numbers there? What I mean is how many more countries would you have safe routes with?
We need to have safe routes for anybody who is fleeing under a well-founded fear of persecution so that they can apply from within that country. So the reason that people are taking boats to come here is because they have to get onto our soil before they can apply.
Let Richard respond.
So they have to endanger themselves hugely to get here, even if they are fleeing horrific violence.
All right.
We need to have a system that is far more compassionate and fair and accessible to
Richard,
people
what do you say?
Where they are fleeing.
Do you think there's support?
And this is a point that just gotten completely lost. A point that's been gotten completely lost in this whole discussion about the fact that, yeah, they need to be on soil to be able to claim asylum. How are they going to find a regular route to get here? What, they're just going to go to the Taliban passport office in Afghanistan and say, hello, I would like to claim asylum in the UK, please give me my passport. Like, come on, live in the real world. They're fleeing conflict. They're fleeing an oppressive regime, right? And most of these people end up in fucking Abbottabad, right? Most of these fleeing Afghans end up in Pakistan. There's a very small number of them that end up coming here. And even then, a much smaller proportion per capita than other European countries as well. We are already lower per capita in refugee accessibility than other countries in Europe. And we were the ones who were, like, spearheading a bunch of the incursions that fucked up Afghanistan. We were one of the biggest funders of the Taliban in the first place.
Support for that?
No, there's no support for that at all. I'm hearing it on the doors, day in, day out. People are fuming, absolutely
And the reason
furious.
they're fuming is because you are whipping up anti-migrant hatred and saying...
True. Very, very true. Jamie and chat. I'll be honest, I didn't know they had to be on British soil. Yeah, that's fucking stupid. What did they expect to happen? Exactly. Yeah, no, it's something that doesn't get broadcast at all. by the media about how the asylum system works. The reason why Ukrainians have a high level of refugee acceptance and have a high level of asylum claims, likewise with people from Hong Kong, is because we have set up by safe routes. What they mean is the ability to be able to have your asylum claim fixed and sorted before you travel, and then being able to arrive via regular means to get here. So people who want to claim asylum in the UK, who are fleeing Ukraine and Hong Kong, have access to be able to hear their claims when they're off British soil, because we have set up processing elsewhere other than on British soil. If you're fleeing from the other countries that I mentioned, you don't have that same ability. We could set up a processing centre in France, and that would stop people travelling across the channel completely, because they could just have their claim heard in France, and then if it was failed, they would go away. The whole reason people are taking the boats in the first place is because there is no way of being able to have their claim heard before they get here. They have to arrive here. They can't arrive here via regular means because they have no visa, no passport, no nothing, because they're fleeing conflict, and therefore they get here, they have their asylum claim upheld or denied after a certain amount of time, with a caseworker hearing whether or not this asylum claim is legitimate or not. If it is legitimate, they gain refugee status, and if it's not, they go back to their country of origin.
You have no idea how angry people are. Let me just tell you, you have to have a number, you have to have a target, and then what happens, Ellie, when someone says, when the government says, I'm so sorry, you don't qualify. So if from their legal safe route they don't qualify, what are they going to do? They're going to get on the boats and continue to die
and
in their dozen.
Well, no, because then they won't turn up. If their claim is unsuccessful when they're processed offshore, then there's no reason for them to come here in the first place, because they know their claim will just get rejected again. Having their claim heard offshore and processed offshore so they can be brought here via a safe route means that there's no reason for them to try and get here via irregular means, because they know their claim would fail and it would be a waste of their money and time and potentially their life if they did. What the fuck are you talking about, Richard? That makes no sense.
In those circumstances, it would be much more reasonable to have a policy that is about stopping gangs and so forth. But when people have no alternative whatsoever, no Ukrainians are coming over on boats because they've got other ways of getting here. Because we've said we recognise you've got a justified fear and we want to support you.
Would you look at that, Richard?
Hang on, I've always supported the Ukrainian scheme.
No, but more.
Interesting, isn't it, Richard? Interesting, Richard, that you've supported the Ukrainian scheme, but you balk at the idea of a similar scheme for Afghanistan or Iran. How strange, how weird, isn't it? How Ukraine he has loads of support for, but he absolutely rejects the safe routes elsewhere. How curious. I wonder why.
Why would we support refugees from one place and not from anywhere else?
But you have to have a number, and interestingly, 20 years ago, we had about an average number of asylum seekers that were accepted in the UK of about 20 to 25,000, and about 20 to 25% of applications were accepted. The rest were returned by a Labour government that was returning some 40,000 every year. That's what we need to get back to.
And these days, it's more like 3/4 of applications are granted because people
of a woke
are
Home
fleeing.
Office.
No, because people...
No, it's because for the last 25 years, Richard, we've been fucking blowing up other people's countries and destabilising huge swathes of the international population. I know that's not your fault. My fault, it's not Ellie's fault. Tony fucking Blair's fault. And Thatcher's fault as well, you know. It's been going longer than 25 years, but you know what I mean. We have done stupid interventionism that's fucked up loads of other countries that were stable before we interfered, which has caused not only initial refugee crises, but cyclical refugee crises due to the power vacuums that we've left and with the militant groups that use these power vacuums to be able to create more conflict. That's our fault. We did this. The UK is patient one. Patient zero is the United States, obviously. But we are America's little bitch boy, does what they are told, and also engages in their interventionism that creates these crises. Iraq, Afghanistan, all that shit. All that shit.
It's international law that you have to prove you've got a case under, because people are fleeing.
But Richard,
funny how it's different in European countries where they've got much lower acceptance.
But they still have problems in terms, as they see it, with people coming across.
Huge problems. I mean, Ellie's right. There is a major problem with international immigration. Major problem. You have to have clear, robust, sovereign borders.
Right, but what
There
would you
are
do
two
then
issues
about
here.
deporting people where we don't have agreements? We don't have agreement with Afghanistan. We don't have an agreement with Syria because we don't talk to or do deals with those governments. And a large number of those people come from those
In that very
countries.
small number of nations, you're going to have an arrangement with a third nation. The Conservative government thought Rwanda was the answer.
we saw how well that worked with
didn't
Rwanda,
work.
didn't
I
we?
never
I mean-
thought that would work.
Volunteers.
You might be.
But Rwanda wasn't even for failed asylum seekers. It was for every person who arrived via irregular means. Rwanda was a country under the Rwanda plan where every single person who arrived via irregular means was going to be sent there regardless of their asylum status or not. Legitimate asylum seekers and chancers, either way, were getting sent to Rwanda. That's not a third country where we send people with failed asylum claims. That's a dumping ground for our asylum seekers. When it comes to the third country plan that Tony Blair had in Tanzania, that was just for failed asylum seekers. It wasn't a place where we sent everybody, even those with a valid asylum claim.
Be looking at something like the Ascension Islands or others, but you cannot accept. This is going to get far worse unless we change course. And I've asked the Home Secretary time and again, how long do you try this ludicrous policy of smashing the gangs?
You want to cut foreign aid? Or we have to find a way of making sure this doesn't get worse. Your plans will make this worse. Not only your plans of supporting the American State Department in whatever interventionist garbage they do, because again, this guy wanted to be a vassal state of the United States. But on top of this, he wants to cut the international aid budget essentially to zero, which is one of the best ways we have of maintaining stabilities in countries that would otherwise create refugees if they became destabilized. Look what happened in Libya. Look what happened in Libya. We intervened, we overthrew Gaddafi for no fucking reason, and then we had slave markets and a giant refugee crisis coming across the Mediterranean. Loads of people died, and it was our fucking fault. It was NATO's fault.
Before you accept, it's not working. You've got to adopt the reform policy, pick up and safely take back. We know it works. It worked in Australia with a variation, and until we do that...
So you don't know it would work here?
We do know it would work, because a
but
variant
without
of
the
it,
agreement of the French?
Well, we say to the French very clearly, you've got this international obligation, and if you don't pick up the boats, we will, and we will take them back. And
Right.
guess what? Within 3 or 4 weeks,
Let me just come over to this side. They've been very quiet, actually.
This is a problem, as we all know, many, many years in the making. 4 Conservative manifestos promised to bring down immigration numbers and failed.
Hang on, this is illegal we're talking about, not legal.
And the smashing the gangs has barely begun, as I said. The counter-terrorism powers that will be introduced by the new bill that's going through Parliament at the moment will begin to impact that. For 6 or 7 years, these gangs have been operating essentially with impunity. We've got to start tackling them. These are the criminals here. These are the people.
That's because both you and the previous government gave them a market. You gave these smuggling gangs a market by not having safe routes, a regular means with which people can come to the UK soil to claim asylum. The reason why the gangs operate is because there is a demand for the services they provide. Provide an alternative, regular means with which to come to the UK to claim asylum, you will have no demand anymore. All the demand for the services they provide will go, and the gangs will be no more. But you're desperate to continue keeping the dynamic we have at the moment. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.